This video has transformative analysis and commentary intended for educational purposes only. This is Going Against PDB, a series where I re-examine popular personality typings and challenge the consensus when the patterns don't hold up. In this video, I'm typing Jong Kook, also known as Sparta Kook, from Running Man. He's widely known for his romantic ballads and his bodybuilder aesthetic. That contrast alone has led to a lot of different typings. On Personality Database, Jong Kook is typed in a few main ways. The most common typing is ESTJ. That's followed by ISTJ. On the enneagram side, he's most often typed as 8W9, with 1W2 also frequently suggested. Well, at a glance, these typings do make sense. So let's check the most awarded comment on his page. It says he's the easiest Running Man member to type, ESTJ, obviously. And that's the entire argument. No explanation, no breakdown, just confidence. And to be fair, I understand why ESTJ feels obvious to a lot of people. A big part of that comes from his obvious obsession with building his body. The discipline, the routine, the physical intensity. But this is where people start mixing things up. ESTJs that are mostly unconscious, developed, and focused often obsess over pushing their body to the max, partly because of their partial control over SE, but they will always show signs of SI as their primary. But that's not the case with KJK, because his SI is basically non-existent, and I explain that in the next comment. When something looks obvious, people usually stop asking better questions. But that isn't the argument that actually matters. There's another comment that's far more thorough, with more likes and much more analytical, and that's the one worth engaging with. This comment suggests that Jong Kook is either ISTJ or an ISFJ who looks forceful because of a strong enneagram influence. It argues that he's too emotionally expressive to have inferior FI, and it uses several moments from Running Man as evidence. To be fair, this is a much more thoughtful comment. It actually tries to explain its reasoning. One of the key examples brought up is how strongly he reacts to moments of perceived betrayal. And this is where the interpretation, according to me, starts to go wrong. Because reacting sharply to betrayal like this doesn't point to strong SI. People with strong SI are usually very forgiving in relationships. They carry the full history they have with someone. So even when they feel hurt, there's patience. One incident rarely outweighs years of context. It holds on. It keeps continuity. What it doesn't do is demand exclusivity. It doesn't test loyalty. Because SI already has a long internal record. It doesn't need constant proof. That's not what we're seeing here. KJK doesn't show that kind of patience or long-term emotional grounding. The reaction isn't slow, it's immediate, and it's personal. This looks much more like having weak SI and seeking intensity-based loyalty that needs to be perfect. That comes from behavioral instinct and attachment, not SI. It's about one-on-one alignment, about are you with me or not in the moment. With perfectionism and a strong sexual instinct, seeking loyalty isn't quiet, it's felt. And when that bond feels broken, the vocal reaction comes out fast, especially with TE. What really stands out is how immediate the emotional reaction is. The feeling comes out right away. The emotion comes out before it's been thought through. And then TE takes the lead. It tries to fix the situation externally so the internal discomfort settles. That pattern fits inferior FI much better. Inferior FI isn't unemotional. It's often more reactive when personal values feel violated. Now, with the argument for a strong influence of Enneagram Type 8 suppressing SI. Even Type 8s with SI or FI don't react this way. Type 8 reacts when control is challenged, not when feelings are hurt. What stands out here isn't control being threatened. It's emotional hurt and betrayal. The comment also points to his routine and discipline as evidence of SI. But this is where Enneagram and cognition get mixed up. Routine doesn't automatically come from SI. In this case, it fits much more with 1W2 self-preservation. That's a perfectionist, disciplined lifestyle. Not because it's familiar, but because it's right. SI-OCD type routines are about cleanliness, comfort, and continuity. 1W2 self-pres routines are about minimalism, self-control, and self-improvement. This whole comment isn't wrong. It's just incomplete. And I spent this much time on this comment for a reason, because it's actually one of the better arguments on the page. If that one doesn't hold up, the rest don't either. Once you remove the Type 8 framing and factor in Type 1, the SI explanation falls apart. And when that goes, so do the ESTJ, ISTJ, and ISFJ conclusions built on it. However, what doesn't disappear is TE dominance. And that leaves one answer: ENTJ1W2, subconscious, developed, and focused. Now that we've dealt with the PDB arguments, let's look at what actually shows up on screen. Because once you follow the behavior consistently, the cognitive functions become very clear. Let's start with TE, because this is his default mode. Jong Kook is extremely vocal about what's right, what's wrong, and what needs to be fixed. When something isn't working, expressing and talking it out externally is his go-to. Correcting people, stating expectations, being blunt, etc. That isn't him being aggressive. That's how he stays comfortable. T solves problems by putting them outside the mind. You also see this clearly in Running Man. He's almost always one of the first, usually second only to Yoo Jae-suk, to figure things out. He collects information quickly, connects it accurately, and once he's confident, he doesn't keep it to himself. He pushes the conclusion outward. He states it, and he expects others to align with it. That's not just intuition guessing. That's data-driven reasoning being enforced externally. Another very consistent TE dominant pattern is the need for clear hierarchy. TE dominant types are most comfortable when roles are defined, when responsibility is clear, and when the people around them actually follow through. So yes, TE dominants naturally build squads. They like having people around them for everything, people they can rely on, people who execute. And almost inevitably, they end up in the leader role in some form, not always because they want power, but because organization, direction, and accountability feel necessary for things to function properly. This isn't a Type 8 power thing. Type 8 seeks autonomy and control for protection. TE dominance seeks efficiency and reliability. And because he's a Type 1, that TE becomes even stricter and demands perfection. The standards are higher, the expectations are tighter, and for people around him, that can feel demanding, even exhausting. Not just because he wants dominance, but because things are supposed to be done correctly. That combination, vocal correction, external problem solving, command over structure, and confidence in applied reasoning, is classic TE dominance. Now let's talk about NI, because this is also where a lot of people mistake him for Enneagram 8. That unwavering confidence people see? That isn't force, it's certainty. He operates with a very clear internal picture of what's going on. Once that picture locks in, he doesn't wobble. He doesn't keep rechecking. He commits. You see this constantly during detective segments. He doesn't just throw ideas out, he waits. Then when he speaks, it's decisive. He connects clues into a single explanation. And once he has that explanation, his confidence doesn't shake easily. Type 8 confidence comes off arrogant and pushes against people. NI confidence doesn't. It just stands there. He's not constantly testing himself. He already knows what he can do. That's not impulsive. That's someone operating from internal certainty. And notice how rarely he second-guesses himself once he's decided. It either fits the picture, or it gets dismissed. That's NI supporting TE. A fixed internal model, backed by absolute confidence once it's formed. Now let's talk about SE, because this is another place people get misled. What we're seeing here isn't SE dominance. It's subconsciously developed and focused SE, which pushes him to refine and perfect the SE he already has. In his case, this shows up through an ISFP-developed side. When SE develops this way, the physical world becomes something to engage with deeply and deliberately. And this explains his obsession with his body. The constant training. The focus on strength, on appearance, on pushing physical limits. This isn't just discipline explained by Enneagram. It's enjoyment of physical engagement. The body as something to experience, refine, and perfect. You also see this in how he approaches sports, especially soccer and other physical games. He has to be good at them. Even when he's objectively mid, he still pushes himself to perform. That's SE enjoyment and obsession. Engaging directly with the physical moment. Competing. Testing himself in real time. He's also extremely comfortable in the physical world. Traveling. Being in new environments. Experiencing places directly. That comfort doesn't come from caution. It comes from presence. And then there are the stunts. The dares. The moments where fear should show up but barely does. This isn't reckless SE. This is NI-backed SE. Because NI already knows how it will go. SE just executes it. So instead of panic, you see calm. Instead of hesitation, you see commitment. So what we're seeing here is not SE leading. It's SE that's been developed, focused, and integrated. Obviously, he isn't an ISFP, so the anxiety and nervousness to perform in sports or any dance performance will be present, but it is easy for him to succeed in them and support his TE goals. That's exactly how SE shows up in an ENTJ with strong subconscious development and focus. Now let's talk about FI, because this is also where a lot of people get confused. Not because FI isn't present here, but because of how it shows up. When he gets emotionally hurt, which was mentioned in the comments, the reaction is immediate. There isn't a long pause. There isn't quiet emotional analysis. That's not FI leading. That's inferior FI reacting. But inferior doesn't always mean undeveloped. And in his case, as he is subconscious developed and focused, some aspects of FI are clearly very developed. Through development and focus, and especially with a strong sexual instinct, he has real access to his emotions. That's where the romantic side comes in. The romance ballads, the emotional expression through music. That's FI being expressed outwardly, letting feelings out comfortably, without sitting in them privately for too long. And it's not limited to music. You can see it in Running Man as well. He can acknowledge how he feels, he can express it. He can even laugh about it. What you don't see is emotion guiding decisions. It doesn't positively sit at the center, and it doesn't quietly steer behavior. So FI here isn't absent, and it isn't suppressed. It's accessible, it's expressible, but it's not in charge. And that's exactly what an ISFP developed inferior FI looks like. Now for his shadow functions, you do see TI show up at times. Usually when he stops relying on real-time data and instead leans purely on his own logic. And interestingly, those are the moments where he's often wrong. When he disconnects from external information and reasons things out internally, the conclusion tends to miss the mark. That's classic TI nemesis, forcing the user to use it and get trapped. His TI isn't refined or continuously updated. It works best only when TE is still anchoring it to reality. You also don't really see NE. He isn't witty in a spontaneous idea-jumping way. But what's interesting is that he expects others to be, and he criticizes them when they aren't. That's NE critic. Low access internally, but projected outward as expectation. Open-ended humor and playful improvisation don't come naturally to him. He prefers NI clarity over NE cleverness. SI is clearly in the trickster slot. He has mentioned multiple times that he doesn't feel pain much at all. That can look like high pain tolerance and as if he is an SI user. But it's actually the opposite. This isn't strong SI. It's a lack thereof or poor overall connection between the mind and body. You see this with a lot of magicians as well. Interestingly, many of them are ENTJs and ENFJs. The body feedback just doesn't register clearly, which creates the illusion of toughness. You also see this in his physical coordination. He's actually very bad at balancing his body. That's a clear sign of weak SI. Strong SI brings a strong bodily awareness to the core and fine calibration. That's missing here. At times, it can seem like he has FE. Moments of warmth, moments of concern. But that isn't FE driving behavior. That's his 1W2 wing showing, and sympathy coming from FI, not FE. He's aware of group emotion, but he doesn't manage harmony for its own sake. If something needs to be said, it gets said. Before closing this out, there's one more framework that matters here. Because a big reason for this mistyping is that people assume one visible side equals the core type. And that's where octagram comes in. Octagram explains how someone can be subconsciously developed and focused in another side of the mind, without that side being their core type. In Jong-Kook's case, we're looking at an ENTJ core, with a subconsciously developed and focused ISFP side. That ISFP development explains the physical obsession, the body focus, the aesthetics, obsession with physically involved sports, the comfort in the physical world. Without octagram, that side gets mistaken for the core. And maybe that's why he keeps claiming to be an ISFP in his YouTube videos. Again, the octagram doesn't change the core type. It just explains why people keep confusing it. The second layer that causes confusion here is enneagram. On Personality Database, he's most often typed as 8W9, and I understand why that seems convincing. But type 8 reacts when control or autonomy is threatened. Jong-Kook reacts when standards and loyalty is violated. What fits much better is type 1 with a 2 wing. Type 1 explains the perfectionism, the discipline, the constant correction, the frustration when things aren't done properly. The 2 wing explains why warmth still shows up, why concern and care are visible despite how strict he can be. Now let's get a bit deeper on his enneagram instincts, as they explain a lot of his lifestyle choices. And here, there's a very clear self-preservation influence. You see this in how he lives. He doesn't spend much money. His lifestyle is minimal. Very little unnecessary social interaction. Even visually, he keeps things simple. Black clothing, neutral presentation, nothing flashy. And most importantly, his obsession with health. Training, diet, physical upkeep. That's classic self-preservation. Maintaining stability, maintaining control, reducing vulnerability. But despite that, I don't think SP is his dominant instinct. What stands out even more is sexual instinct, especially when you factor in type 1. Type 1 sexual variants are countertypes, which means their intensity shows up more openly. This explains the easy access to anger, the sharp reactions, the lack of emotional buffering when something feels wrong. That anger isn't simmering quietly, it's expressed. It also explains his extreme expectations around loyalty, not from everyone, but from people close to him. Sexual instinct isn't about group rules. It's about one-on-one bonds. So when that bond feels violated, the reaction is intense, immediate, personal. This isn't SI loyalty. And it isn't type 8 dominance. It's SX-driven attachment paired with type 1 standards. Type 1 discipline often gets mistaken for SI, and type 1 rigidity often gets mistaken for type 8 power. But this isn't memory-based discipline. And it isn't dominance. It's principle-based correction. To be honest, I could be wrong about his instincts here, as it is very confusing, so my second bet would be on him being an SP-SX instead of SX-SP. I also want to briefly touch on face typing, not as primary evidence, just as a supporting pattern. When someone is heavily subconscious developed and focused, certain shadow functions stay underexpressed. For ENTJs that are SDSF, that often means SI, FE, and TI, don't show strongly. The face doesn't try to look soft or accommodating. It doesn't manage emotional harmony visually. It looks firm, muscular, direct, purpose-driven, and with a strong protruding jaw. And add type 1 SX intensity to this, and the face looks even more masculine. Face typing doesn't create the type. It reflects long-term cognitive emphasis. Once you factor in cognition, octagram, and enneagram together, the ENTJ pattern becomes very hard to unsee. If you disagree, feel free to go against this typing. Tell me where you think I'm wrong, and what type you think fits better. Next video in this series will be on another Running Man member, Kwang Soo, who I think is mistyped as well. Take care, and see you next time.